I'll start with the first question of the night. So, how did all this stuff start for you?
So, I mean, I was a very reserved child. Um, like I had friends and I grew up pretty normally. I have both my parents, and they're very much in love. So, unlike a lot of people who I'm close with now, you know, it, it didn't come from a place of like I grew up having no one or anything like that. It actually comes for me a lot of seeing how my parents were. My parents are very much in love and they always have been. Um, my dad, if you ever wanted like the perfect example of a man obsessing over his woman, it would be my father with my mother. I mean, there is no truer love than that of my dad to my mom. You know,
Mm,
and I think that's where my interest in like music and more lyrical stuff comes from. Is my dad loves listening to love songs and a lot of really like deep, hearty stuff. So it made a huge difference to me growing up listening to real, very emotional stuff, rather than whatever was popular at the time.
okay, okay. No, I get that. All right. So it seems like you and I, when it came to like the poetry and the music aspect, it seems like you and I had a similar upbringing, I guess, in that sense, where even though I had a rough childhood, but there was that aspect of my parents too, where they were like lovebirds. So it was always the whole, okay, like you honor your wife, they honor your husband. And yeah, I get what you're saying about the whole being in love thing. I know for me, when it came to my parents, especially like my dad, it was always poetry, it was always writing. And that's how that started for me too, because I saw him doing it. So I just said, oh, let me just do it myself as well.
Right.
So what was it about the poetry that drew you near, I guess, if that makes sense?
So I'd been writing a little bit when I was a teenager, but like most people, I grew up thinking that poetry had to be a very like definitive line. It had to be, a certain style, there had to be either rhyming or this kind of, visionary language, things like that. Because when you think poetry, usually people who don't really know poetry attribute it to like Edgar Allan Poe and things like that, so they expect it to be a certain type of way. And as cheesy and ridiculous as it is, I can actually like pinpoint the moment that I was brought back into it when I saw how things could actually be. Is was just out of high school and I was having a really rough time mentally. And one morning I woke up, it was like 10 or 11. Um, and I just started scrolling through my phone, just really feeling kind of like garbage. Um, and I came across Button Poetry, and it was Neil Hilborn's OCD. And,
Mm,
and to this day, that is one of my favorite pieces of all time. It is one of the most heavy hitting pieces that I've ever experienced. And, I sat up and I just thought about it I had to have been sitting there thinking for 30, 35, maybe even 40 minutes. I was just kind of staring off into space, just really absorbing what I just heard. And from then on, I had this drive to write and get my feelings out there in a much different aspect.
okay. And so the poetry from the button poetry, because I know button poetry. I think I know for me that's when I first saw like these platforms existing before Instagram was always button poetry. So um I know about Button Poetry. It's a very interesting platform, I will say. I've seen a lot of poets on there that were very like, oh snap! It kind of opened my eyes a little bit, so that was very interesting. But what was it about that piece that spoke to you? Like, what was it that really resonated with you with that piece?
So I'm not sure if you're familiar with the piece, but the piece is about him having such severe OCD that it makes relationships difficult. And at the
Mm,
beginning of his relationship, uh, she like everything for him went quiet. Suddenly, the tics, the trouble, all the issues that he was having with this mental disorder, they slowed down for a while, and she thought it was really endearing. But as time went on, it got old, and she started seeing that it was taking up a lot of time in her life, and she ends up leaving him. And it was just this really heartfelt, just absolutely breaking piece. And to this day, it is one of my favorite pieces. And it was just such a raw emotion. And he talks about the beautiful things he sees from her and what her leaving did to affect him. But it really is, for me, the last line that absolutely. I think it's the last line. It's one of the last lines that absolutely, like, when he said it, it struck such a chord with me, and that's what made me sit like bolt upright. Because he talks about how he has to turn the lights on and off over and over and over, until the fixation is quenched for his OCD, and he made that
mm,
point of I leave the lights on, and I just remember this chill running up my spine, and I sat straight up.
wow. Mm, wow. There is so many symbolic is ugh. So there's so many symbolism there. It's so crazy because the whole leaving the light on thing, because light could represent so many things, right? Because light could be a positive thing, but light could also expose something, if that makes sense. And that's the way that speaks to me from what you're saying, right? Because it's like I've kept something in the dark, but then it's like when I turn on the lights, I'm okay with having the light on because I'm okay with what I have in front of me. I mean, I don't know if that's what he was trying to say, but that's just how that spoke to me, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it actually is quite like that. His point being that he purposely, with all the power that he has, fights everything that is his OCD to get himself away from that. So, he purposely leaves the lights on even though it emotionally kills him because his OCD is telling him, like, they got to go off and on and off and on. And he's
Mm,
fighting it, and just anything that even remotely feels or sounds to him like this girl. And, if you've been through heartache, everything reminds you of that person.
mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh man, no, this is good. I like this. Yeah. Yeah, it's like the undecisive factor of life, right? Because I like, do I decide to leave this off or do I leave this on? Do I draw attention to what this is or do I not draw attention to it? I feel like in life we're like that too, right? When it comes to decisions, I feel like actually I'm gonna just demonstrate. Like it's like this, right? Because it's like, okay, do I want to deal with this decision or do I not want to deal with that decision? Like, okay, maybe I shouldn't do that. And I feel like it's exhausting sometimes because it's like oh man, like why can't I just make up my mind already?
Absolutely.
And it's like, oh man, because I struggle with that overthinking too myself. So I know you also do, you and Florence do the Poetry's Promise. I know you guys, are in the poetry scene. Like, how did you find that poetry scene? Like, was it something like, oh, you just went one day, saw it? Like, how did you find that scene?
So, as Florence had mentioned during their interview, we became acquainted through our good friend Billy Mack. Um, Now, had no idea about the poetry scene. I had no idea what arts were out here like that. Um, there was a kid who had started working at my job named Mitchell Kresge, and he is a musician who very talented, by the way. I don't know how you find him because he's kind of MIA, but he's a very talented musician, and he and I got to talking while he was working at my job, and I mentioned to him that I'm a musician, I write a little bit of poetry, I really like the arts, and he had mentioned that he knew a place that had an open mic, so he brought me to Billy Mack's one time, and I mean, the rest is history. It was the most incredible experience to be there. It was such a calming, loving environment, and everybody was so open and understanding. And I'd gone once or twice just to get the feel for it, and I have no problem admitting it. And I say it all the time because I want people to understand the gravity of what a safe space can do. Is the first time I read, I was shaking so badly I could barely breathe, and I burned through like two or three pieces. And then immediately, as soon as I was done, I bolted outside and I sat down and I lost it. I unloaded. I was sobbing like a fucking child. It was
Mm,
such a freeing experience.
wow. So you talking about that, you like was that like a nervous feelings or was it because, like like because it was your first time? Like but when you say you were sobbing and stuff like that, were you like upset that it didn't go a certain way or was it more like I'm happy I did it, but I could have done better? Like how did that like walk me through that? Like how did that look like for you in your eyes?
So I think the furthest thing from my thoughts at that point was how the performance went. Um, at that point, because I'm a very realistic person, I'm a very objective person, so I recognize that it's my first time. I'm probably not going to do as well as I could. And even now, I don't feel like I'm at my full potential with performance. Um, but it was the first time I've ever openly performed my work. And at the time, all my pieces were about a very recent subject that was touchy isn't even a good word for it. I mean, it was raw still, everything that had gone on. I had been with someone for a very long time, and she and I ended up breaking up because things were just really miserable between her and I. And when I say a long time, I mean nearly 7 years. Um,
Mm,
and that I was already pretty much over and out of. But, you know, after that relationship, I didn't know what to do with myself or who I was, and somebody else kind of latched onto me, and I got really enthralled in this person. And, then she lied to me, she cheated on me. It was a huge deal, so all of my pieces were about, denial, anger, hurt. It was just a lot of raw emotions that I wasn't ready to feel. So I wrote it all down, and then it just kind of came spilling out, and I couldn't stop it. As soon as I finished, I felt it starting, so I had to run right out the door. And I just sat, and it forced me into a realization of everything that had happened, everything I'd gone through, not just with that relationship, but in my past as a kid and as a teenager, everything I've dealt with, everything I've seen, so it was kind of like opening the floodgates to understanding that, emotions are real, and you can't hold them in. You can't bottle it up. As much as we'd like to say, there are appropriate times and places for it, and that's the only time that you really need to check yourself emotionally, is understanding the situation. But outside of that, I mean, it is so imperative to get it out there, to get those feelings somewhere, channel it into anything you can, because I have never hurt as bad as I did that night.
So in a way, so would you say like in a way that that emotion scared you a little bit because you didn't feel like you've never felt this before?
Absolutely, it did. I was mortified, and my friends came out. Uh, Florence being one of them. They came out, and they just sat with me and comforted me, and it was a really big deal. But then I drove home, and I didn't sleep that night. I
Mm,
was up all night because I could not figure out what was going on in my head, and then I started writing more, and like that, I was out like a light.
mm, mm. Okay, so you're saying like once you started writing more, the more you start to explore yourself in a way that, okay, I didn't know I felt this way. But that like just doing all that, going through all that, like has that helped you like maintain that scariness better? I don't know if that's the right way to ask that question. Like, has that helped you make, I guess your emotions, everything that you feel like has all like just doing the poetry and knowing, okay, this is real emotion, and then the writing help. Like how has that helped you? Okay, has that helped you in a better way than it did when it first happened?
Absolutely, 100%. You know, through my time at Billy Max, and then we started going to Black and Blue for a little while, which at the time it wasn't very conducive for poetry, but to my understanding, through Florence and a handful of other people who now regularly attend, it's changed drastically. So I am excited for the opportunity to possibly go back there to see how it is myself. Um, but then, we started going out to the New Jersey stuff with Damien, Cord, and all of them, and it reignited my passion for writing. And once I started really seriously writing with the intent on doing more with it, I became so much more emotionally mature as a person. I now am able to separate, my anxiety for performance from the actual performance. And then afterwards, I'm able to, kind of let it in and deal with it. But I perform now better than ever because I'm able to handle it and control myself because of, that first night at Billy Max where I realized there's a lot of emotion that I wasn't dealing with, a lot that went into it. So I figured out kind of the key to holding myself together and being able to, perform and write and have people talk to me about my writing has been such a helpful thing in the way of it allows me to recognize where exactly I stand emotionally and being able to see who resonates with what, and being able to express those feelings, those thoughts to a group, especially the group at our show, who is one of the most incredible groups that I've ever experienced. Such incredible writers with unbelievable amounts of love and respect to be given. Being able to refine myself in front of this group, standing alongside them, um, it's changed me, not even just as a writer, but in my personal life. I'm a lot more centered, a lot more objective. I can look at things a little more strategically. Um,
Mm.
so I have nothing but thanks for poetry for being what I needed when I had it the worst, and for continuing to be something that I rely on heavily when I really need, an extra boost.
Wow. So okay, so so you talked about how it's helped you maintain your maturity, it's helped you control everything in a better sense than it was before. It's helped you overcome a lot of things. I wanted to ask you about the maturity aspect of it because that's very interesting. You said that it says that it's helped you with your maturity. Like, if you don't mind me asking, like, in what way has that helped you? Is it more like a perception thing? Is it more of, oh wow, okay, maybe people have it worse than me, or maybe people, or is it more like, hey, I can use this as a survival guide and I can help somebody else? Like, how does that look like for you?
So there's two major sides to it, at least for me. Um, One of it is being recognition, right? Being able to write and perform and get my thoughts and feelings out there. Um, it, it allowed me to be able to look at myself from the outside, as well as take a look into myself, my emotions, my standpoints, and objectify them. Take them completely away from the person and look at them and say, this might be too much, this isn't enough, this is a really strong point, and being able to analyze myself. And in analyzing yourself, which I recommend everybody do, you start to evaluate how far you've come, and you start to uncover things you didn't know were there, feelings, thoughts, emotions that you didn't know existed. They just kind of come to the surface the more you write and the more you experience, and it becomes very much a journey of, you know, learning and understanding. And as cheesy as it can sound, it is very, fulfilling. So it's kind of like soul searching. Um, and then the other aspect of it is when you become more serious about writing, more serious about poetry, not only do you find yourself amongst some of the most gratifying, incredible, wonderful people you've ever met, you run into these people who they're very cutthroat would be a good word for it, but it's not that serious. You know what I mean? People who they want to force themselves in where nobody's fighting for a position. It's got to be their name in the light, their name first on everything, and I know as well as I do about that kind of thing. Um, and I think we've all seen it in a lot of different ways, is just people become everything that they write about. They become nasty and violent, aggressive, and unnecessary more than anything. So you learn to check yourself in those environments. Bayonne was a great example. Is you know, it would have been easy to get on the mic and curse those people out and be mad and act a certain type of way, because I've never strayed away from a rumble, so I very well could have started a bar fight, but that isn't me, not anymore. you know, and poetry has been one of the big things to help me. Is it allowed me to check myself and decide I can't beat them at this game, so I'll just be a little louder than they are. So
Mm,
I had to hit it a little louder, and I absolutely did. I shouted into that microphone, and I was heard whether they wanted me to be or not. So
wow.
I, I took the wiser decision, a decision I might not have made if I had never continued on with poetry, because I
Mm,
was a very angry, very disagreeable young man, and I learned a lot over my time. Not only how to perform, but how to check myself and recognize a situation where nobody wins. So there's no reason to put myself in a situation like that, because if I don't interact, then at least I win.
mm, mm. Wow. Damn. Okay. No, no. This is like wow. And no, no. I'm glad you mentioned the open mic because I know for me personally, like I said, this was my first time doing it. I did it at a bar. I mean, you and I talked about certain things already, but I will say
Right.
this though. It did teach me a lot about when we do these events. It did teach me how to discern the audience, how to better interact in a way that, okay, everybody is at their comfortable space, right? But you said something very interesting, because that was in the beginning of my message on the open mic. I said the main objective I want is, I like we're living in a time where we're just told to hush hush and shush, and everybody's all sensitive about things. But I said we live in a time where we need to be loud, right? And you pretty much just display that. It's true. We need to be loud, and I feel like the analogy I can take from all that right now and just say this. Yeah, so the noise around us represents the surroundings, and the people are trying to talk over us, or they're trying to hush us, or like trying to mess us up. But what you did was you overcame the noise, you overcame whatever was surrounding you, and you still spoke loud. You spoke
Absolutely.
as loud as you could, and people heard you. And people, it was like, no, you're gonna hear me whether you want to or not, whether the hockey game is there or not, whether you're playing pool or not. I'm going to be loud, because it's true, our words do matter. And it's like, but I love the analogy out there, because I guess the way, like, from what I understand from what you told me, it seems as if like it helped you test yourself to see how loud you can be. Not loud as in like, oh, I'm gonna be obnoxious, loud as in I'm gonna speak my truth no matter what type of situation. So I love how you broke that down the way you did. And so um so about, okay, it's so good. Yeah, there's so many directions I want to take this in. So I'm trying to grasp all everything. So as okay, so your writing style, right? Just writing overall. All right, so do you consider yourself a poet, or do you consider yourself a spoken word poet? Like, what do
Oh,
you
I'm
consider yourself?
yeah, I'm
Wait, say that again?
absolutely a performer.
Okay.
My if you read my work direct, it doesn't nearly have the same effect, right? Because when someone is a written poet, no matter how it's read, who reads it, what inflection there is, there's a certain magic behind it, right? There's a certain direction and flow that brings you to a certain uh, a certain completion when you read those, right? Edgar Allan Poe is a great example of that. Obviously everybody grew up reading at some point some of his work. Um, so when you read his stuff, there's a, a certain air about it, right? Like what, what's the line? Uh, the weak and weary as I ponder that line. I for whatever reason I'm brain freezing on it. Um, but no matter how you read it, it comes across the same way, and everybody seems to have the same general idea of it, right? But one, for my work, I don't want that. I don't want
Okay.
everybody to be able to read it and hear it a different way, because that causes strife. It causes disconnect with your audience. And secondly, is I write my stuff to perform, because if I am going to take the time not only to write it, to put it on paper, to put it out there, you are going to hear it in my voice. And I will not give you an option on that. I will scream it into every microphone, every ear, every sound system. I will scream it from the top of the buildings if I have to guarantee that when you read my work, you know who it is.
Mm, okay. And I wanted to ask you about the written and the performance aspect of it. I guess you kind of knocked that question I was gonna ask about what do you think is the major difference between, but you kind of just answered it already. So it's like, yeah, okay, you kind of went ahead of me a little
Yeah,
bit.
I'm good like that.
Yo, but I know it's true though, because I think when you read off, like, okay, I wrote a piece, you know what you want your piece to sound like, but I think when you read it and memorize it, in opposed to performing it, I think those things are different. So my question is, how do they differ from each other, in your honest opinion?
Like writing versus
Like before,
uh
because I know you're talking about the performance, but in your opinion, like let's say I write the piece, but then I read it out loud. I'm reciting it, or let's say I memorize my piece and I read it. But do you consider that to be a performance, or is that just us memorizing? Like, what do you say would be the difference between doing that and opposed to actually performing it? Is it because of the raw emotion that it brings when you're performing it? Like, is it the hands? Is it the movement? While you're like talk to me about that.
so I think that begs an important question, dependent, because obviously anybody who writes can read, right? So anybody can get up, like I could get up on the mic and read a Rupi Kaur poem. That doesn't make it any better. Doesn't mean you're going to hear it in my voice because it's her piece, and you're not certainly not going to hear it in her voice because yeesh. Um, Shade aside, though, uh, anybody who writes can read, right? And that doesn't always necessarily reflect the feeling behind it, right? Now, when you write, the question is, do you read it in your mind, or as you write, do you use the way you say the words in your head to put the emphasis, right? Like if I write, and the light was dim, right? I could just read it in my mind as, and the light was dim, right? You see what I'm saying, and you have the emphasis on the light and how bright it is, right? But when I write in my head, it has nothing to do with how it looks on paper. It is the way it sounds when I specifically say it, when I put that emphasis on whatever word, when I give that mentality, because my pieces, especially, even though I give like a long synopsis in the beginning of every piece I write, um, you really don't know what's going on in the piece. You don't understand the topic until you fully made it through. And if I didn't write it to perform it, none of my pieces would be interesting because they're not overly lyrical. I don't use a ton of ridiculous, unnecessary language because I do have a very vast vocabulary. But what is the point of that pretension if nobody I'm speaking to is going to understand, right?
Mm.
So I keep it clean, I keep it raw, and I'm very upfront and honest with my work. And you can hear, like, think of rumors, right? You can hear a rumor about me from someone and know if it's true or not, but there's still that part of you that says, I want to hear it from him because
Mm.
you need
Mm.
that direct line. You need to know from me, you need to hear my version of it, right? So you could have it in your mind like, no, that's not true 100%. I know that Daulton's not like that, but you still come to me not only to let me know, hey, so and so said, but is this true? If you already know it's not, the reason you ask is because you need that confirmation, right? So when I read, I give that confirmation.
Mm. Wow. Okay. 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 That's good. The rumor that I did not expect you to take it there. I love that. And I think that's what it is. It's like, oh, I didn't hear it from the horse's mouth. So that means it's not true, or I just heard an interpretation of the rumor. But and that's it. Now we replace the word rumor with piece, with
Exactly.
poem. I get it. Yo, that's pretty good because I didn't even think about that one for a second, but it's so true because I read your poem or somebody told me about the poem, but I didn't see the actual poem from the actual person. So even though you showed it to me and I read it or I heard it from a certain way, but I didn't hear it from you exactly because let's say, for example, I'll just use Florence' name as an example. So Florence could tell me, hey, this is what the poem's about. Hey, I read it. I think this is good, and let's say you show me the paper of of the poem being read,
Right.
but I don't know exactly how you intended to this piece to be read, or this piece is meant to be understood or the emotion behind it because you're not the one that's actually reading it. Now, if I heard you actually read the piece, or I heard you actually perform the piece, then I get the full essence because it's your piece. You wrote it. This is how I want it to sound. You heard it from my mouth, kind of thing.
Yeah, a lot of the language I use is very aggressive. I recognize that a lot of my pieces are very aggressive. So without having that confirmation, it's really easy to get a misinterpretation, right? Like my piece about growing up here in Allentown. It has a lot of really aggravated undertones. So just reading it, it comes across a little more angry than I intended because it's not an angry piece.
Mm,
It's a heartbroken piece about seeing my friends go through something I've never experienced, about having in that situation the unfortunate, luck of being born into that kind of household or having, people pay certain kinds of attention to you because of things like skin color or having your parents around, things like that. I never experienced that, and seeing my friends who are really, really good people, great people, going through those situations was absolutely heartbreaking. Now, if you read that piece directly from the paper, it seems like I'm mad, like I'm pissed, and
mm,
I'm not. I'm sad for them because really great people died. They went to jail. They got hooked up with the wrong crowds, and now I don't know what happened to them. You know,
mm,
great people just they ended up in the wrong path of life because they were a product of their environment. So that piece isn't an angry piece about how horrible Allentown is or how they should be mad for me or I should be mad for them or anything ridiculous like that. It's saying like, these are my friends, these are people I love, and I'm so sorry you had to deal with that. But
mm, mm. So
without
it's more
me
like a
reading it,
no, no, go,
without me
go ahead. I'm
reading,
sorry.
yeah, without me reading it, you wouldn't get that. You would think that I'm angry and I'm calling to arms, and that's just simply not the case. It's me mourning my friends who are gone and hoping my friends who are still around are okay.
Mm, mm. Yeah, no, I get that. I get what you're saying that the interpretation is everything. So let's say on paper, and but let's say I'm just reading it, it does come off. Let's say, yeah, this guy's really angry at the world, but then in reality, that's not really what it is. And I think it goes back to like just in life, not what you say, but how you say it. Because I could say I love you, right? But how the delivery speaks different volumes, right? For example, I could say, "Yo, I love you, man," and it's genuine. But if I say, "Yeah, I love you," okay, and you say it's such an aggressive tone, is it really? Are you really love me genuine, or are you just saying that because you want to get out of my face? Like, what's the deal here, right? Because it's like it reminds me of I don't know if you know Dane Cook is the comedian.
Yeah,
So there was this one joke. He's like, God bless you. And but the way he said, but what it really sounded like is saying, cover your fucking mouth. So I'm thinking about in that same way, like I'm saying God bless you, but maybe the tone and how I say it and how it delivers, maybe it's intended something else. So it depends on how the person's delivered. Like the person that gets the delivery, maybe they see it a different way, if that makes sense. I think that's what you're trying to say, right?
yeah, and especially in this day and age where linguistics are, you know, the the way we view language has become such a vast space, where something as simple as a period in a text message makes all the difference in the tone of the message, right? So if you read it as just plain on paper, it changes the whole meaning and you might not understand where I'm coming from, but like that exclamation point makes the difference. So,
Mm.
it adds the inflection. And if you can't do that and still be a proper writer, then the only way you can give that inflection is either use more creative language or scream it from the fucking rooftops. And I choose the latter because I love the performance. I love, you know, one of the most gratifying things in the world to me is when somebody comes to you after your performance and talks to you about your piece. You know, hey, I really resonated with this line, or, you know, I really love that piece. I love when you read it. You know, what did you mean by this? When someone comes and talks to you about what you write, it lets you know somebody is there, somebody's listening. And that's something you don't get just by handing someone a piece of paper and saying, read this. You get that feeling when you go out, you perform it, and you give it everything you've got. You channel the emotion that you had when you wrote that piece, and you convey it to the best of your ability with everything you've got. Somebody out there will hear you. Somebody out there will recognize, and they will almost certainly every single time approach you. And that is one of the most incredible feelings in the world. And that's why performance is, to me, a lot more. It's a lot more understandable and acceptable than, you know, a lot of, especially media with, you know, publishing and stuff. They kind of discourage that type of thing because it's not proper. It's not, you know, it's kind of an eyesore when you hand someone a piece that was meant to be performed. So a lot of places, publishers, they will reject those pieces because it's not as clean or as polished. And I can't stand that because the least polished pieces I have are the pieces that always hit the best and get the most reaction.
Amen. Wow. No, damn, that's a lot of. Woo. Okay, hold
Yeah.
on, because like I'm trying to process all this, man. Because damn, this is so true. And I think that's that percent. Even in the publishing world and opposed to performance, so I guess what it is, those two different worlds don't really understand each other in that sense. It's interesting because the performance gives the language of what the piece is. So with that being said, I wanted to ask you, as far as so your pieces, you write them down first and then you practice it. Like how does that look like for you? Or do you already have it in your head and you're just writing it down just to write it down, but you kind of already know what that looks like? Like how does that look like for you as far as the performance? Like how do you prep for the performance? Like all that. Like how does that look like for you? And before you go, I was just reading some of the comments. The beauty of poetry is all the creative freedom it allows. Yeah, I definitely agree with you on that.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, Funny enough, this is actually one of my favorite questions because it's one of the biggest flexes I have. Because I'm not a very, I'm not an arrogant person. I'm not very like up in my own head. I don't get like that, right? Uh, but I have no problem every now and again flaunting or flexing rather a few of my better traits when it comes to my writing. Um, you know, because I'm a firm believer that the only way to succeed at something is to believe you are not the best, but to believe that you are one of the most capable. You have to believe that you are at that level to be at that level, or you'll never reach it, right? So, that being said, um, it's one of my favorite questions because it's one of my biggest flexes. Is not a single one of my pieces has ever taken more than 20 minutes to write. Never, not once. Because
Wow. Okay.
I nearly every single piece, and I say nearly because occasionally I'll write a thought down, but 9 times out of 10, if I just put an idea down, it'll eventually go away. It just disappears because I never finish those pieces because I don't feel them well enough. I don't feel them strong enough. But the pieces that I complete, that I write all the way through, I feel them so deeply that I, I'll be in the middle of literally anything, right? I'll be at work and I'll quick run to the bathroom, and 10 minutes I come out with a new piece and it's almost ready to perform. You know, obviously little edits here and there, changing the way things sound. You know, I use this word in this line so I can't, like little stuff like that. But none of my pieces have ever taken me more than 20 minutes to write because I only write what I absolutely feel. It can't be 60, 70, 80% of what I feel. It has to be 100% at that moment. And that's why I
Mm,
don't write all that often. I don't have a ton of pieces that I perform, but the 3 or 4 or 5 that I do perform are all really heavy hitters because I can't write it if I don't 100% feel it.
mm,
So I love when people ask me how my writing process goes because I'm literally just taking a dump and then boom, there's, jazzman gospel.
ah! Oh man, no,
But that
I
that is
get
literally
that.
how I wrote Jazzman Gospel. I was on the toilet and I just started going, and then there it was, and that's the one that I perform that I remember.
Mm, mm. Wow, I love that. That's how it is with me too. Like, yeah, because I love to walk around. I'll go to Manhattan, I'll go to Hoboken. I don't care. Like, I just love to walk. And so this is kind of funny for me, but I like to have conversations with myself. So I have a headphones on to pretend I'm on the phone with somebody because I don't want people looking at me like I'm fucking crazy and shit.
Right.
But it's so funny, right? Because sometimes the thoughts that come out of my head is so all over the fucking place. But something would happen, and I said, okay, let me sit down, let me take off my phone, and either I'll record
Right.
myself having the conversation or I'll just come up with a piece right there and then so I could write it down later on. Or I say, I have a thought in my head, I can't talk, so then I'll type it in on my little notes and stuff like that. Because before I used to carry a notebook, now I don't really do that anymore because of the phone. So I don't remember last time I wrote anything on a notebook unless I was home and it just happened to happen like that, or if I'm studying the Bible or whatever, or just whatever, having a thought then. But that rarely happens these days. But there's something about like when it just happens at random, what you feel at the moment, and it's something about that when you read it, it's like, yo, this is fucking dope. And I've had pieces where it took me 2 days to write because another thought came to mind. I said, oh, you know what? I can add this to this shit right here. But that's happened to me too. Yeah, like you'll take a dump and then like something would just pop in, and it's like, okay, wait, I don't know why it just happened to happen like that, where I just took a dump and I thought about something, and then okay, let me write this down. Um, that's I thought I was the only one. I'm gonna be honest with you. I did that shit. That's crazy. Like,
No, and
yo,
it's fantastic because it's like, especially like bathroom, shower, things like that. Those are the most creative times, in my
yes.
opinion, right? It's like, and it's funny because because you mentioned that like you would go through and you would add stuff. It's kind of similar for me. My issue is I put too many ideas into one piece at a time. So when I burn through and write a whole piece, almost every single piece that I write ends up being split into 2 or 3 pieces because I put too many ideas in, and then I go and say, well, I like this line, so that'll be its own piece. And I go and I separate it. So, usually when I write all the way through, I don't really have to go back and add stuff. I have to take stuff away and either turn it into 2 pieces or take a section out completely because there's too much going on.
Okay, yeah, I like that too. I've had a really long piece that was 3 pages long on the thing. I said, okay, I'm not, no one's gonna read a 3 page thing. I'm not, no way.
Right.
So it became 6, 7 different pieces. Like I had to take lines or take certain stanzas, certain answers. I said, let me put this with this. It's like a puzzle, but it's so fun because then sometimes what happens is, okay, I got 3 pieces ready, but then a fourth piece would come out of nowhere, add on to it, and it's like, oh shit, okay, wait, maybe I should add this to this one right here. I think it's fun. It's like a puzzle, but it's also like oh my god. I guess like if you have like a deck of cards, the more cards you put it on it, the more it grows. But then I gotta take certain cards out, and maybe I can have a new deck on a new
Right.
stack somewhere else. But it's so, oh man, bro, damn. Okay, oh my god, this is so good. This is so good. I love this what you said because this is like holy shit, man. We're not even that yo. We're not that different when it comes to that. I mean, the difference is I'm not a performer. I'm more of I'll read the thing, but I'll try my best to make sure that people capture the emotion when I read, if that makes
Yeah,
sense.
absolutely.
But I feel
Right.
like, but I definitely agree with you said. I feel like when you perform it in a sense like, okay, maybe I don't need to read off the paper, and then little by little I'll grow in a way that okay, maybe I could add more emotional, or maybe if it's attended a certain way, maybe I could get I okay. Okay, here we go. I could reach the full potential of what I want the emotion to be, like performing it rather than reading off the paper and trying to get the emotion out there.
Yeah, of course.
I don't know. Did that make sense?
Yeah, no, I got you.
Yeah, yeah, okay, okay. Oh man, this is good. So, are you able to give us something right now, an example of how you write? Are you able to do this?
Yeah. I'll just it, it's one of my favorite pieces to read, and it's the one I remember, so it'd be probably the easiest to recite. And I get a lot of uh I get a lot of people who really enjoy this piece. Um, it's the name of it is Jazzman Gospel, and what I attribute to the Jazzman is, somebody who's kind of like a snake in the grass, somebody who, they're friendly to your face, and then they treat you a certain way behind your back, and they do everything they can to, build you up when you're around, and then they just take and take and take, and we've all met a jazz man, you know. So now, keep in mind, I am at home, so I won't have the same energy as I would normally performing it.
Okay, it's
But
understandable.
yeah. So this is Jazzman Gospel. We are all victims, victims of that same old song, and it's a tune we can tap our toes to. So may I have this dance? Because we are all suckers for that sucker punch snake in the grass. They love to lie and waste your time because it doesn't really matter, and all that jazz type gospel that sets a world bathed in blood on fire. It's hot. Hot like the fury of generations to humanize simply for it is what it is. When age plays a role and gender plays a role, when capability and merit do not stand on their own, they become the first stone we may not cast. Hot like the pen, mightier than the sword, though they lack the couth or the courage to wield either respectably. Hot like the sword, they pull from one to sink into another. It cuts clean through the haze of the writer's block bad days. The fog has been lifted. Now let there be light, so we may be guided from the gallows these half-truth men made of glass have ushered us into. Gallows built on the bastard bones, taken from the homes of our hunger, and our desire is to be good enough. So carry on that sing-along, because we've all heard it. We've all been there. And just remember that some of us listen to the music and some of us make it.
Oh my god, yo, yeah. Oh my god, yeah, yeah. Oh my god, 'cause I know you did perform that at the open mic.
Yeah.
I know that, so I got to hear a calm version and then the loud version. It's wow. It's so funny. Cause now I heard it even more clearer because like it was more calm, but like I heard the snake in the grass. Now I see why you
Yeah.
said that. Yeah, I definitely see that. Oh man, bro. Okay, man, I have this dance. Like, yo, that's crazy. I love how you said that. Wait, give me 1 second. Woo. Okay, hold up. I gotta. Oh man, PoetryGasm's happening right now, man. This is Oh shit, man. Oh, okay. Um, damn. Okay, I'm like speechless right now. I'm sorry. Just give me a minute, bro. I'm so sorry because that really just like, mm. It is. I think what you said was so true. We always that the whole tap your foot to the. I love just break down like how did you like every line like that just came out of nowhere like that when you wrote that?
Yeah. Yeah. So a little bit of context for it is at the time I was dealing with. So I kind of layered it as a double meaning, right? Because I was dealing with some people who were, very, very back alley kind of transaction. They, you know, I knew they were up to a bunch of nonsense, right? And it was at a time where I really didn't have the patience for it. So one of these people, and I will never name names because one, it's not like that, but two, it's not that serious,
Right.
so I just want to make sure that that's out there is, uh, it's not that serious, and I took it a lot harder at the time than I should have. Um, but these handful of people, they were very shadowy, very, very deceitful. And at the time, they had made this big point of, you know, trying to make myself feel like those around me weren't really there for me. Like they weren't really my friends. They were, going behind my back. And I recognized, like I said earlier, is when you know someone well enough, it's the truth or if it's not the truth, but you've got to address it with them. So
Mm.
at the time I was really, really upset because I knew it wasn't real, but there's always that little, inkling of a doubt. So I did that piece about the both of them because I knew on one hand the person who was telling me these things was absolutely full of shit and they were just marking themselves up for self growth, and on the other hand they were trying to separate me and pull me down from good people in my life. So I wrote that about the both of them, but it was always very, very pointed in one direction of that. And then I went and I spoke to the other person, and it's actually one of his favorite pieces now that he knows, you know, that it was in part about him, but only because of the lies that had been told.
Mm. Got you. Oh, it reminds me of a conversation me and my friend Stephanie have sometimes. Like, we'll talk about different things, but the one thing she always says to me, and it's funny because when she first said this line, you know how they say actions speak louder than words, but it falls within that line. But she says, like, we first started interacting, we reconnected. She says something so profound, and it always stood to me. It stood with me this whole time. I didn't realize how much of the impact this was gonna have on me until like right now in this life. And she said, "Don't listen to what people say. Listen to what they do."
Exactly.
And I was like, "Oh shit!" Because it, and then that's why when she said that, and I'm like, "Oh, so that's why they say actions speak louder than words." Because I even in the things of God, I always say this: anyone could know the Bible, you could recite scripture, but if you don't apply that to your life and practice it real. Because like, let's say I could read one scripture and it speaks to me differently every time, but it's for growth and stuff like that. But I can be a pastor, I can do all this stuff, but if my actions do not portray what I'm preaching to you or what I'm trying to demonstrate to you, then everything you know doesn't mean shit.
Yeah, it's the concept that every house is a house of God. It's just a matter of it doesn't matter. You could go to church every Sunday and still be a terrible person,
Exactly.
and you could never go to church a day in your life and be a fantastic person. If that's the religion you choose to follow, then you are doing your job as a patron of that religion, as long as you are practicing and, following what you believe to be the best version of what that God believes for you.
Right. No, that makes sense because it also takes me back to a preaching I heard a long time ago where like the guy was he was trying to say like we were like trees, and you know how tree when you plant seeds and the tree grows or a plant grows, it produces fruit. There's good fruit and there's bad fruit.
Yeah.
And he says something along the lines of, if you have to constantly remind me that you're a good person, I'm gonna question you because I'll see it for myself. So like a tree, if you have good fruit, I'll see it for myself. You don't have to remind me. You don't have to tell me that you have good fruit. I'll see it for myself. And it's so interesting because I had an interview with Rain, the creator. She said how you have a lot of good things, and you all it takes is one little spoiled thing, and everything else gets spoiled. But isn't it crazy when you have a lot of spoiled things? One good thing you put in there, and the vice versa doesn't happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And I see that a lot in, everything I do, especially in, like the poetry and in my writing. I've come across a lot of these situations. Uh, And I am a firm believer the best thing you can do in these situations is one, obviously not take anything too seriously, right? You have to be able to maintain your emotional maturity in these situations because people are going to talk and everyone's got something to say, but until they do something that is a genuine call of action, there is no point in responding or reacting because that's exactly what they're looking for. And I'm learning a lot through self-education. I can't read it because I don't really have the time to read with work and stuff, but I have Spotify, so I started listening to a book. It's called
Mm,
The 48 Laws of Power. And
okay.
it is a fantastic book, but it is dark. It is difficult to get through if you are not in the right state of mind for self-education. Because a lot of people look at it and they think that it's a book about learning how to deceive people, how to, shyst your way to victory, and that's only half of what it is. The other half is educating yourself on how other people will treat you if they are trying to step on you to get higher. So it's also, a warning tale. It's 48, rules of thumb for success. And through reading this and listening to it, I've done a lot of self-reflection because what's important to a reader who, embarks on this journey with this book is if you don't reflect on yourself, you are not right in the head because everybody is guilty of something in this book. And if you don't recognize that, you're either a liar or a psychopath. There is no way to be neither while reading this book because it
Wow.
teaches you a lot about human nature and it gives a lot of historical examples of these things.
Mm,
And through reading this book, I've looked at these situations that I've mentioned before, as well as other situations of my life, and realized, okay, this is, law number 7. This is what they're doing to a T. How do I handle it? So then when you go through each chapter, they do an observance of the law, which is a historical situation where this law was enacted. And then they do an overview where they look at the law and reflect on it and, point out like where mistakes or where victories were had. And it teaches you how to enact or derail that law based on this situation in history, right? So reading it has really taught me how to handle myself and have a certain decorum about myself in these situations.
mm, wow. I love that. And I think that's true. I feel like a lot of us in life, I feel like if we did more self-reflecting, I think maybe, I don't want to use that cliche, oh, the world's a better place. No, I think people be more calmer, I guess if that makes sense. I mean, I'm not saying it'll be a better place, but I think like civilization they should be more aware enough. And I think that's the problem too. People are just not aware enough about things. And it's true too. There's also that denial aspect. Oh no, I don't got any of these things. Well, that means you're in denial because I always believe in the whole nobody's perfect, not even me, right?
Right.
And I'm all fucked up in the head. I'm not gonna lie. I mean, I carry myself better. I carry myself in a way that okay, maybe we wouldn't think that, but it's just But yeah, no, I'm really fucked up in the head to the point that's. But I'm aware of it. I know, I know I got things to work on for sure. But it's true. It's so true what you said because I definitely agree with the fact that yeah, reflection I think is very important because you'll learn about yourself that way. As a matter of fact. And I'm gonna end it with this before I ask the last question because we are towards the end. And pretty recently, so my mom, when I was decluttering her apartment, she had gave me these videotapes of like home videos and stuff that we had. That's pretty much all I have of living stuff, like actual footage because we didn't really have much growing up. And it's so
Right.
interesting. I was looking at this and I was looking at videos of myself when I was 9, like my birthday. This is how much I don't remember my past because it was so blurry. But looked I was looking at myself. I paused there. I was looking at myself, and I was looking at my son, and I'm just like, what can I do better in my life so my son does not inherit my bad side or certain things of me that he like generational curses that don't get passed on to him? What can I do? And I'm thinking in my life, well, I'm not Superman. I'm not God, right? And I was just like, okay. But at least I'm thinking myself, wait, but I'm aware enough to know that, hey, at least you know you want to do something about it. You want to change or you want to explore more about yourself. Because I don't know too much about my past like that, where, again, it's so blurry. But it made me curious about it because seeing these videos trigger things about me that I'm just like, ooh, like it's kind of scary. It's kind of scary in a way, but I think that's good. I guess because that's when, like, if you're willing to explore that raw emotion of it, as scary as it is, I think it's breathtaking as well at the end. I mean, would you agree on that?
Yeah, absolutely. And what's important about that is the biggest thing, in my opinion, for self growth is self recognition first and foremost. Understand where you're going right, where you're going wrong, and be honest with yourself. Because that's one of the biggest things that I've noticed is a lot of people lie to themselves about the world around us and the things going on, and that's how we end up in a situation like we are in this day and age with a lot of non-problems being the forefront focus in such an unnecessary way, which is what's leading to conflicts and these unbelievable situations that you never would have dreamed of, you know?
Mm,
And it's important to remember, and I think this is what kind of made people lose the way in the first place, is especially in this day and age, with social media and all that, love is a choice. Anybody who pretends it's not is 100% lying to themselves. With a
mm,
relationship, you have to wake up and choose that person every single day. Even when you are fucking furious with them, you have to choose that person every single day. You have to actively, mentally, consciously choose that person. And same thing with children. When you have children, you love them unconditionally, of course, but you have to love them in a different way too, where you have to choose the kind of love in which you give them. So
mm,
you see something that you as a kid would have gotten, beaten for, right? You have to choose to love them differently, because it's not to imply your parents didn't love you when they were, hitting you. It's just they handled things differently, and maybe they weren't handling things at all. So
mm,
you have to love your kids enough, and you have to choose your kids every single time they do something that would elicit that reaction, enough to recognize that maybe that's not the way you want to do things. And then you have to love them enough to choose a different path.
mm. Wow. Wow. Yo, man, we could go on for hours and hours, but yeah. Oh my God, this is so good. Wow. You know, this has to be a topic somewhere within Unraveled Conversations, right? Because this is good shit, bro. Wow.
Absolutely. Well, so actually, I don't know when you intend to cut off, but I do have a couple things I want to touch on before we go. Um,
Okay.
so first is, as unfortunate as this might come across, as some people might see, once I explain it, they'll realize there really is no difference. But I am purposely and openly announcing my separation from the Poetry is Promised magazine.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
I From the start, I've done literally zero work on it, other than occasionally helping Florence pick out like a color or something like that for a page. But I have never actually done any work on it, and I refuse to let people, Florence especially, lump me in that situation and try to add my name to something I've had no hand in, because I see it all the time and you see it all the time. You know, these groups, you know, sometimes it's just 2 people, 3 people, 4 people, and there's always one person who does all the work, and there's always one person who is the cash grab. They need the limelight. They have to be the me, 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 and it becomes stressful, and it stops being fun or interesting, and everybody just gets annoyed with the presence at that point. You know, and I never,
Mm,
ever, ever want there to be a doubt as to who Poetry is Promised is, and it's certainly not me. And I don't want anyone
mm,
to believe it is me because I don't do anything for it. So I'm announcing formally my separation from the magazine because it's not my project. Florence does all the work for it, and everything that has been accomplished is due to Florence and their work.
mm.
Um,
Wow. No,
Go ahead.
hands off to you, my friend. So much respect for you for that. And you know what? Like, I'm glad you said that. That you just bring that up. Not because I mean, no, I mean, it sucks that you're not gonna be doing it, but I understand where you're coming from. But this is a topic that me and a few other poets that I talk about a lot. Like, and one thing I told my best friend, Stephanie, and I always say this, and this is why I say, and you know this too, Florence. You guys know this. When I bring people on, I don't bring just anybody on here. I'm very careful about who I bring here. Have
Right.
I made mistakes? Yeah, of course. Because again, I've been in this. So as far as the Instagram virtual aspect of this niche of the community, I've been here since 2018, and one of the biggest things that I had to learn. There are people, not everybody, but like a lot of people I've interacted with, there are people who would join something just because they can say, "Oh, I was a part of this," but then not really do much. And it's like you said, it gets annoying because I'm like, damn, I'm doing this, and like you're part of my team, you're not contributing to nothing. I'm not saying that's what that was with you. I'm just saying like there's the frustration part behind that,
No, no, it
and and then
absolutely
when
is
you
how it
and then
was.
yeah, and then you try to explain that to them, and then they get defensive about it. This has happened before when Jammed Them Down. Before this was Unraveled Influence, this was Jammed Them Down. Then it was Six Sections Live. Then I took a hiatus, then I came back in 2023. But it's the whole, like, do you understand what I'm trying to do here, right? And the reason why I say so much respect for you and my hands off to you because of that is because of the fact that you recognize something and you step back before it got to a place that like I'm not saying that's what you were doing. I'm just saying you were recognizing that, oh, I don't want to come off as if I'm doing something when I'm not, that kind of thing. That's why I said so much respect for you for that, because that takes a lot for someone to actually step back and say, oh, then you know what? Because I don't really do much here, so why am I doing this kind of thing? And it's not all that you're knocking her or you're knocking anybody else. It's just the recognition. Oh no, like I'm not really contributing much, so it's like I shouldn't be a part of something if I'm not contributing. And it is in a mature sense, not because oh this is stupid or anything like that. No, it's just more about hey, like this is the reality I face. And yeah, quote keeper, yeah, we talk about this a lot. Yes, this is so true. Me and Stephanie talk about this a whole lot because like we again, me and her have been in this community for so long, and it's like people like the idea of being a part of something but don't really do much or don't do anything about it. So like I said before, that's why I said so much respect for you for that, because you recognize something and you did the action about it, and that just helps me respect you even more, to be honest with you, man. And I appreciate you bringing that up because it just comes to show like now. See, there is that side of maturity that a lot of us don't practice, and again, so much respect for you for that, because this is something me and Stephanie talk about all the time. And like I tell everybody, that's why like even when I invite guests here, or if I invite people, hey, do you want to be part of the team? I don't bring just anybody. Because like I said, have I made mistakes? Yeah, and
Yeah, of
you
course.
know the bullshit already, but but I love the fact that it just it's good to know that, oh wow, like okay, this the maturity aspect of it. And I wish a lot of people understood like you understood. I wish a lot of people did more understanding of things like that. So thank you for sharing that with me and trusting me with that for sure. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Anything else you want to add on before I ask my last question?
Yeah. Um, and just a quick note on that is, the last thing I want to do is bog Florence down as, having me be a pick me girl. And I use pick me girl as like a generic, like it's not necessarily about any one sex or race or anything, or gender, not race, anything like that. It's just the pick me girl is that person who, is pick me, pick me, pick me, and they have to put their name first on everything, and they have to make sure that everyone knows who they are and, oh, this person has arrived. And that's just not what I ever wanted to be with the magazine. Um,
Mm,
but so that aside, um, I am actually starting. One of them I'm starting, the other one I'm in the process of starting. I have two projects that I am going to be working on and intending to work on in the very near future. The first being, I have actually started it. I'm writing a book, a full length novel. Um, I, I don't have too much on it yet. The All I have really is the concept and like the first couple lines, but it's essentially a woman falling in love with a cult leader and regretting it, we'll say.
mm,
Uh,
okay, okay,
and then the second project is, I might have mentioned it to you before, but I'm not sure. Is I am looking to start kind of my own show in a sense, like a podcast or something to that effect. I'm not entirely sure yet.
okay.
Um, and I intend it to be, and I'll say it this way specifically because I know a lot of people will handle it a certain way regardless of how I word it. Is I do intend for it to be rather controversial.
Good.
It's going to be a conversational piece. Where I talk to people or I get questions and answer them, things like that, and just kind of voice my opinion on the middle ground of where I stand. Um, because as I've made mention, is I consider myself rather emotionally mature, rather well handled. So I feel like a lot of people, I personally, as self sucky as it sounds, I feel like a lot of people might benefit from my opinions or at least my thoughts on certain subjects. And, even if I am able to just change one mind out there, that's enough for me. But it is
Right.
definitely going to be a very controversial thing. So I'm kind of moving slow on that one because feelings are going to get hurt, and a lot of people cannot handle that right now.
This is how I look at it. Sometimes it is what it is. I
Right.
know what you're saying because one thing I'm a big wrestling fan and Eric Bischoff says something. He has a book. It's called Controversy Creates Cash. So I'm not saying that's gonna make money. I'm just saying sometimes controversy is needed because it expands the mind. That's how I feel sometimes. And I feel like we gotta have that uncomfortable. That's why I started doing the Unraveled Conversations with you guys because I know, like, yeah, we're not everybody's going to agree on everything we talk about, but that's okay. And that's what I want the space for. So I love the fact that you want to do your own thing also. And let me know, man. Yo, and like I said, you already know, bro. If you need any resources, I like to give back. So however I can help you with that, recording wise, I got you. Like you know that already.
Yeah, and
Um,
that's it. I just want to note on something you said there quick, and then we can do the last question. But that's exactly the point I'm trying to make with it is I want my show to be that de-escalation, to take it from this big, like, heavy-hitting, controversial opinion where everyone's bickering and pissing and moaning back and forth, and turn it into a real conversation. Because I love to debate. I love to have uncomfortable conversations because they don't have to be that difficult. I've been listening to a lot of politics and getting, kind of my bearings on which direction I'm going with certain things. And I love when I can watch both sides talk about something and either agree on something or agree to disagree or find a common middle ground. I don't like watching
Mm,
when it becomes screaming and yelling and insults. That's ridiculous, but that's how it is very often anymore, and I don't like that. So I'm hoping that my show, whatever it turns out to be, is that middle ground where we can discuss uncomfortable topics like adults and talk about it like we're grown.
mm. Amen. Amen to that, man. Amen to that, brother. And again, so much respect for you for that. And I mean, sometimes you and I have interacted too. I know what you're all about, so I know this is gonna be interesting podcast once it starts, man. I can't wait to hear it, man. For sure, for sure. So I'm gonna end it with this last question. So when people hear your name, Daulton Reppert, right? What do you want people to remember you by? What impact you want to leave? Like what is it that you hope your legacy fulfills once you're not here anymore? So talk to me about that. Like, what do you want? What does that look like for you?
I want I less want people to remember any one specific thing about me. I want memories or feelings to be my what precedes me. I want people to look back and say, he changed my he changed my heart in this way, or he helped me through this really rough time. I want to be someone that people look to when they need help, when they need a different perspective. I just want to be the guy. Everybody in their life has the guy. It doesn't matter if they're a guy, girl, you know, non-binary. It doesn't matter what they are. We all have a quote unquote the guy. It's that one person we go to for everything because we all need someone to lean on occasionally. And I've always been that for all my friends, and even throughout this piece, I mean, I've mentioned quite a few things that you've reacted pretty phenomenally to. So I like to think that that's the reaction that I'm vying for. I want to be able to, drop that knowledge on people and help them see the world through a different view than maybe they would have before, or, picture things from a way they wouldn't have thought. And as long as I help one, two, three people, that's all that matters. Would I like to help more? I would love to help the masses. I would love to hold seminars where people come to see me, not because I want that attention, but because I want to help that many people.
Mm, amen. That wow. Wow, man. That's wow. And amen to that, bro, because yeah. Yeah, yeah, because that's definitely important for sure, man. And it's like I said before, man, this again, like since I've known you guys, I see that in you for sure. Like there's no doubt about that. And again, I'm honored and privileged to have met you. And to think we met through, well, I met Florence through Scott Ladotti's interview, and then from there we just all connected. I met you guys in person at the open mic, and here we are having this conversation, doing our every other Friday stuff, and it's just like wow, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's like I always tell, like, yeah, I'm gonna be 39, but I'm always learning from each and every one of us. I'm always learning. Just because I'm older than you or you younger than me doesn't mean that we can't learn from each other. And I love that. So, Daulton, thank you so much for doing this interview with me. Thank you for just being you, bro. And
Thank you,
like I
my
said,
friend.
dude, I see it. I see it, man. I see the realness in you, man. Real recognizes real, brother. And again, I'm honored and privileged to have met you. And yeah. So guys, thank you for joining us. If you whether you're catching the replay or whatever the case is, thank you so much for just joining us in this conversation. Thank you, Daulton, for doing this. And